Greetings everybody and welcome to Zero Hour. This is episode 1 where we talk about some of the important issues going on in our daily lives, including the woo-woo, the UFO situation, and what's on our mind and just off-the-wall stuff. We are going to attempt to do this once a month, once an hour, and if it catches on, we might do more. So here we go. First topic is Alec Baldwin. What did he know? Why did he or allegedly point a prop at cast members? Why was it real loaded gun and a prop? Now, this is a Western flick called Rust, which I love Westerns. It is such an interesting time period in American history. But the question remains, what was going on? And it is a tragedy of what happened. And Alec Baldwin, in my opinion, is a complete and utter douchebag. He has used some choice words towards those on January 6th to the police officers who have accidentally killed someone. So, should he claim this is an accident? Will Baldwin be held accountable for the murder of a crew member? Or will he be let go and let off the hook as all rich people do in our two-tier justice system? Someone needs to be held accountable. He shot her. Others need to be held accountable. An accident, perhaps, but still. Perhaps he needs to be charged with manslaughter. Some are dismissing this situation as tragic, but I'm not going to hold back on that. I think that it is clear cut. He killed someone. It might be a vehicular manslaughter. He needs to be held to account, including the prop masters and others involved. I don't care who it is. So our next topic is hate speech. Is it free speech? Of course it is. Under the American Constitution, the First Amendment, speech is clear cut. No matter if you think you disagree, because you do. That is not how speech works. It is amusing that many think otherwise. To be honest, it is cute that they think that. Hate speech can be anything and be protected by the same First Amendment. Just because someone's feelings got hurt for using a word doesn't mean it's hate speech or any less protected than the speech you speak about. Many nations across the world, you could be arrested or detained or otherwise, but just because you don't like it, tough shit. The U.S. Supreme Court has found on many cases in the last 100 years that the speech has many forms that is protected as it was intended, even in today's society. People tend to think otherwise, no matter if you agree with it, but when speech becomes a violation of that speech is when speech turns into an action that happens to be violent, not through words, but actions. Physical actions through a person or a group against another, but it has to be an action, not words. Words can be hurtful, but they are still protected speech. Also, you can't have the First Amendment without the Second upholding the First. That is why the Second Amendment is so important and why the founders thought so. And our next topic is NASA. Is it outdated? Should it become part of Space Force? I am not a big proponent of NASA. I have worked in one form or another in the DoD defense industry to the national security arena. I have seen a lot in my 22 years of working in different capacities. I have, in the last 20 years, have thought that NASA, while it had its time in the past and its glory, I think it is time to end the agency, even perhaps rolling it into Space Force or eliminating it altogether. I have found that the agency is nothing more than a welfare program for engineers alike, to run endless budgets that go nowhere and amount to nothing more so than it produces. And now, with the emergence of private spaceflight, granted NASA helped it, but with the way that Congress in recent years hasn't reined in NASA, but has thrown money, it hasn't amounted to producing really much of anything. They have done nothing to get us back into orbit on American-made vehicles since grounding the shuttle. said we are paying the Russians, and now with SpaceX around, they are bringing forward American vehicle. But at times, it seems that is at a crossroads due to other outside objections, such as Blue Origin. To Jeff Bezos, that has a space company, but has never placed an object into orbit, and yet he thinks he and his company is entitled to governmental contracts, or being one up on the moon project with Elon. Sorry about that. I know I am harsh about NASA. I would say it has done a lot in terms of helping the private industry of space to getting into orbit. But NASA, due to its being a government agency and the lack of funding, to the red tape, it is a shell of its former self, is all I am saying. I think that NASA could have a role to play, but peel back all the innovations in making or building vehicles when it isn't necessary any longer, and perhaps NASA could forge a new destiny of sorts from helping to ensure that its legacy holds up to what it once was in the past. I feel that it could, but we all know the government agencies don't change well from the entrenched bureaucracy. But I could be wrong, as an internal struggle seems to be afoot. The next topic is SpaceX, the situation with the environmental report and Blue Origin. I'm going to take a sip here of coffee. NASA and Starship. My excitement in watching them blow up starships to landing them, I have to, sorry everybody, I have to tell you a funny story. I was watching the final flight of Starship when it finally landed without blowing up. I was at work and I yelled so loud that my boss thought something was wrong. Instead, I was I just excited to see that it landed without blowing up. I was so excited knowing what comes next. The fully stacked Starship and orbital launch. I wasn't alive when Apollo happened. Elon has so much going on, from Neuralink to the Boring Company, Tesla of course, to even Starlink, and knowing that all of these projects have one goal in mind, Mars. Yes, I said Mars. I say that in part that Starlink would be a great communications array in orbit of Mars. To Starship and its possibilities. It is endless, in part to what Starship can bring to bear in terms of equipment in one shot. Of course, Mars will need tons of equipment before humans arrive on Mars. I've always thought that Mars should be a one-way trip. It is hard to get back, and I am sure that people would welcome doing so. It might not be easy, but you would be pioneering just like the first settlers that came to the Americas. Yes, people will die. That doesn't mean we stop. We push forward in the name of progress and becoming a multi-planetary species. But Jeff Bezos' butt hurt that he isn't where Elon and SpaceX are. He had hoped to be that much closer, and I had high hopes for the other companies. Now SpaceX has enabled other nations, other companies. From all indications, some companies have reached out in the hopes of help from Elon, which from all indications he has, from such companies as car manufacturers to that of other space companies, to throwing out an idea of Hyperloop, which seems practical in terms of changing the way we travel here on Earth, to that of Mars. It blows my mind that Bezos is so petty that he would hinder private space, all for what I and so many others see as ego. It's like this: you built Amazon, which is great, and the number one employer in the world. You are not an engineer, and I'm not saying I know that what the best way, but don't act like a fucking child. Get off of it and get your company moving, or step aside is my situation. And our next topic is Boeing. What is going on with the once great company? So, if you're not aware of it, Boeing has built the Starliner spacecraft for NASA, and they built the 737 MAX, and two of them have fallen out of the sky. What is going on with Boeing? Once one of the great innovators of spaceflight to aircraft for commercial use. It is that they don't know how to operate in this new space in which they have dominated for decades. The challenge is to an image issue, to reputation and credibility in their ability to produce a safe aircraft, either it being for spaceflight or commercial flight, are up in the air. This company has been indicted for fraud, alleging that they deceived the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, while it was first certifying the 737 MAX that is now grounded. Matter of fact, I live near an airport, an area that used to be an old Air Force base, and that's where they're making them bring in all of them and stuff, and they're still doing it because they're still building, which is crazy. First certified the 737 MAX that is now grounded. They have been given one-day passes of flight with strict flight paths over the ocean, be brought to locations, be parked until they can be either saved or be dismantled or otherwise. No one knows what's going to happen to them. The charges were not against a top executive. Instead, they were against Mark Faulkner, 49, who was chief technical pilot for Boeing during the certification process. But how much of this also has to lay on the feet of the FAA itself? Where is the accountability in the terms of being held accountable at the FAA? You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. I read an article about a former engineer who stated that they were overcomplicated the aircraft in terms of electronics on board, with AI taking over for the human pilot. I'm sure that this is the case. Why? The U.S. military has wanted to remove the human element for decades, and they still can't do it. While Boeing remains a dominant force in commercial flight, airlines may be increasingly wary of conducting business in the future, especially if it leads them to incur additional unexpected liabilities from or for the operation of certain types of aircraft, which I completely agree with. Where does Boeing go from here? Perhaps they need to start from scratch. Start getting rid of the cancer that has created this situation. That means taking out executives or other leadership that allow this. Otherwise, nothing changes, and Boeing will become a footnote in history. The entire situation is tragic, no doubt about it. However, a deeper look into the culture that has evolved at Boeing or has allowed to emerge is unacceptable. Boeing lost 2 aircraft or another 600 people total, I think. It is not even a commercial aircraft that is also the Boeing Starliner spacecraft. They attempted to launch it only for it not to reach orbit, or an affected orbit. It came back to Earth, didn't deploy its parachutes. It still managed to deploy at least 1 or 2, but the spacecraft came back, but you can't even deploy parachutes. So it is not just commercial aircraft, it is also spacecraft. And I think it's just an overcomplication of electronics. The AI, they're really trying to automate things and stuff, and some things just you can't do. You know what I'm saying? And it's just enough is enough, It just drives me nuts. So, the next topic is William Shatner going into space. George Takei can't shut up. So, what is this? Grumpy old men or just George Takei being George Takei? Takei has way too much time on his hands. The man is attacking Shatner for going into space on Bezos' joyride giant penis. Perhaps since Takei likes dick, he is just jealous that he wasn't able to ride the giant dick. In all frankness, I was concerned about Shatner's age, but I guess Bezos made sure that he was able to make the flight. Killing one of the most beloved actors wouldn't do Bezos any favors, even being one of the richest men in the world. But this decade's feud when it comes to Takei is just come on. Takei referred to him, Shatner, as a 90-year-old guinea pig to see space impact on an unfit specimen. While I can agree to disagree with the statement, I find it rather tarnish and a tooth of Takei, at least Shatner did it. I know Bezos did it for star power and who Shatner was. Hell, Shatner was scared. He admitted it, being as big as he is. Takei had his time. When was the last time he has been in anything? I think a lot of it has always evolved around not being in the spotlight, and Shatner was always in the spotlight. It cannot be easy either. I don't know what to think of it, but I'll say this. The two also exchanged jabs in their respective memoirs, and while Takei happily participated in the Comedy Central roast celebrating Shatner in 2006, the beef has continued to simmer well into each actor's golden years. During 2018 Q&A, Shatner was asked if he wished Takei had died instead of Leonard Nimoy. What a terrible question, Shatner said, before adding, yes. In response to Takei's latest remarks, Shatner told Page 6, there's psychosis there. There must be something else inside George that is festering, and it makes him unhappy that he takes it out on me. Why would he go out of his way to degrade me? It's sad. I feel nothing but pity for him. It really is. It seems really petty, The U.S. military claiming UFO sightings up across the nation. This is an interesting piece that I found. There has been a spike in UFO sightings across the nation with the recent release of the U.S. intelligence UFO report. Are there most people looking into the skies or in something else? 2020 produced 7,200 UFOs and increased over 1,000 from 2019. U.S. government and military confirmed investigation sighting of U.S. UFOs, bringing this phenomenon back into the mainstream. Earlier this year, the DoD's Inspector General launched an investigation into how the unidentified aerial phenomena were being monitored by the military. A Florida resident recently caught two orbs on his home security camera. The video shows lights moving rapidly across the frame. Further examination of the video to see if this was a logical explanation, such as drones, satellites, or birds, was inconclusive. Without a definitive answer, it does raise questions. Are we alone? And the other thing too is the government recently, released, their phony findings on the, Congress made them, have a due date on explaining certain things, and as usual, they, put it off as usual. So, but I think, that's what it's going to be, Next up, UFOs and the future of national security. Should we have a discussion on this? This is another really interesting article that I found very interesting. As if the UFO situation has never been taken seriously, even today, but it might within the national security arena that we are not aware of. As you're aware, UFOs and those that dive deep into it were always considered crackpots or treated as being relegated to fringes. Any talk of it would be usually linked to questions of ancient aliens, abductions, and who made the pyramids and crop circles, which are not fringed by any means. As said, they are very legitimate questions, and with so much cover-up from decades and decades by our governments across the world, especially the U.S. government, to recent times of another dud of announcement by the government. But more and more with the emergence of the internet, people are able to come together on mutual love of the subject, which others create misdirection or otherwise hoaxes. But that has always been the issue of fame and the spotlight of it all, I guess, But how much of it should be concerned with when it comes to a stance of national security, or should it? In a recent discussion by Arizona State University and New America, they explore the following topic as such. And this is not my own words, these are copy and paste now. For a long time, the feeling of the military between 1947 and roughly 1953 this is a very tense post-war moment. The beginning of the Cold War, it seemed very possible that foreign adversaries like the Soviets had developed craft that could easily maneuver us and travel several times faster than the speed of sound. And so it was very clear, real clear, and concerned that there were things in our airspace that we couldn't account for, said Gideon Lewis Krauss, 2017 National Fellow at New America and staff writer for The New Yorker, which was very, very an interesting time, I have to say the least. I don't expect to understand, that thought, but it is what it is. But the point was serious. But the point was serious reports were coming in from credible people. People like military pilots, civilian pilots. There were hundreds of these reports coming in to the Air Force every year. So the feeling was something had to be done about the fact that all of these strange sightings were happening, of course. But what are you going to do? Lewis Krauss added that, on the other hand, the U.S. wanted to project a powerful image of itself and not acknowledge these things that it didn't understand. Yes and no. I think that's just a cop-out. We're entering its airspace, causing American officials' opinions on matter to split. There was also the feeling that we could not show that we were ignorant of stuff going on in our airspace. Of course. We couldn't show that there were repeated incursions into our airspace, potentially by adversaries that we couldn't account for, especially in early moments of the Cold War. We never wanted to project that kind of weakness, Krauss said, which I totally understand with. So there were two countervailing tendencies among officers or officials. There was the feeling we should take weird things seriously because it's the only way we're going to learn there's stuff going on that's beyond our kin. And other hand, we need to prevent people from taking weird things seriously, or it'll look like no one's minding the store. I think that's nonsense. That's just discrediting conspiracies and people's facts and stuff, I think. So, who are the credible people and who are not? So an average person is less credible than a pilot because they saw something. These different approaches on addressing UFO sightings ultimately culminated in congressional hearings in the 1960s, publications of a report, scientific study of unidentified flying objects, which dismissed the phenomena, despite the government still tracking of UFO sightings on behest to the general public. To some extent, history of this time shows the UFO conspiracies aren't totally wrong to believe that there was, in fact, a concerted effort to get people not to take this stuff seriously. And it worked. No, it didn't. Around the 1970s, that's when you start seeing mainstream media making fun of these things. You see most official announcement making fun of these things, Lewis Krauss said. Well, the media is a joke, and we know that today. So, at the same time, behind the scenes, you still have people taking it seriously because the concerns about potential national security implications never went away. So the decision was in public. We still need to project strength. We need to show we know what's going on, and that's we're never left puzzled by flying enigmas. One possible reason that the stories of the UFO sightings are now appearing on mainstream outlets more frequently is because the increased interest among new generation of officials. No, I think it's because the internet and people have just dismissed the government and are going at it on their own. There's no reason to believe that our high-ranking officials, government officials, both elected and in military, are prone to have more reasonable, rational beliefs than the rest of us. Lewis Krauss said, the sort of cynical answer is, well, lots of people are interested in UFOs. So this is a matter of a few kind of UFO nuts who managed to end up in positions of power where they could fund UFO studies. See, I don't like that. That pisses me off in saying that. Another reason for the increase in dialogue around UFO sightings, widespread adoption and deployment of drone technology. It's no surprise that this has coincided with early years of widespread drone deployment increasingly over the last couple of years. There's definitely some evidence that at least some of the mysterious UFO sightings over our carrier groups probably represent drone swarms. Lewis Krauss said, and so then the balance that had set the taboo in motion began to shift. That all of a sudden it seemed less important for us to emphasize that we knew everything that was going on in our airspace, and a little bit more important for us to say, look, if we're hearing weird things from our pilots, we might need to concede our puzzlement in public in order to make sure that we are getting good information, to make sure that that people are on the front lines to tell us what's going on. In other words, more credible people than actual regular average people. But the government's oblivience about publicizing UFO sightings is unlikely to change any time. There's always this question of, to what extent do you want to leave yourself open and vulnerable by saying that you don't know what's going on, he said. I think that the UFO story is a great case study in why exactly we would admit uncertainty and oblivience, and why would hide that uncertainty and oblivience. That is why it is up to the people of the world to come together and bring together discussions on the very topic, bringing together experts to military or otherwise to discuss it, creating something that is outside of the control of propaganda and the agenda that is or our world governments like. So, on to our very last topic. The NIH, Fauci lied. Nuremberg trials should commence. COVID mandates, out of control, unlawful, no law, just decrees by out of control politicians. So I am sure, or you're not, you have heard about the situation regarding the NIH. NIH is kind of like the top research government for biological, chemical, and all that stuff. And Fauci is ahead of it. Recently, in the last few days of recording this, the NIH, which he oversees, threw him under the bus over a gain of function. Sorry, everybody. And throwing him under the bus over gain of function, using it as a means of denying that they had any part in it, is utter... I'm sorry, everybody. I'm fighting freaking allergies. It's utter BS that they think they can get out from being held accountable. Gain of function has no other scientific purposes other than weaponizing and creating chimera of human-animal DNA and merging it to create viruses. This is Frankenstein stuff. That is what it is. There is no reason the U.S. government forbids funding. This is the reason why the U.S. government forbids funding of said type research. We have to have morals and ethics, but these people have no morals and no moral compass. These experiments are no different than the experiments that were created under a certain regime in World War II and outlawed under the Nuremberg trials and the Geneva Convention to said same type of Frankenstein type of experimentation which they funded a Chinese lab. They gave the money to a third party knowing it would make its way to the Wuhan lab, and now the NIH and the mainstream media doing everything they can to spin and cover this up is nonsense. We all know that this is a bioweapon against the world population. The Chinese CCP to Fauci, the NIH, and anyone who had a hand in it need to be held accountable. But we know that will never happen. I will say, Senator Paul in the U.S. Congress was right all along. So I'm going to end it here. Let me know what you think about this. We're coming up to about 30 minutes. I've got some timestamps and stuff. Is there something you want me to talk about? I'm going to try and have a co-host with Night's End and all that stuff, but I'm going to put this out there. Send me an email. I'll have all the information down below in there and stuff. Everybody, take care. Take care of your mental health. Talk to somebody if you need to talk to anybody. If you need to talk to me, contact me. You can get a hold of me in the About section. Email me, I'll talk to you, not a big deal. If I can save a life, I will. But take care, everybody. Peace out.